Thank you very much for joining with us today. I am going to try to remember, so we've got a couple times for questions or comments or whatever. I'm going to try to remember to repeat those questions. So if I forget, tell me to repeat them later so we can kind of get those recorded. A couple people couldn't be here, they're traveling, they wanted the meeting, so we are recording it for them for their viewing pleasure. But we want to make sure they can get the questions afterwards. So we don't normally do an update meeting this time of year, but I wanted to just sort of start by just reflecting on, this is actually just like the week of the 12th anniversary of the church, which is kind of cool, I know. So, it was like one time I was talking with Beth, and she's like, man, we've been married for 15 years. And I was like, it's been 16 years. She's like, well, 15 good ones, like I'm not going to make any joke about that with the church. But nonetheless, it's always good to, part of the reason we do the update meetings is to get everyone on the same page, to answer any questions. The partnership with the church, all of us, I think it's so cool that God's brought such a diverse group of gifts and talents and personalities and ages and backgrounds, and even now, coming into primary languages, our first languages together. It's a mini reflection of, I think, what heaven will be like, and so I think that's just a wonderful component of being together, a church family together. So I'm truly grateful for that. I'm truly grateful for the opportunity to minister with all of you, to see God work, to see our lives getting changed together, seeing new people added by the Spirit of God into the family of God. That is all just awesome. Like I mentioned, this is not the typical time of year for an update meetings. We pretty regularly, for the first, I don't know, I'm terrible at timelines, maybe 8, 9, 10 years of the church, had update meetings once a year, beginning of the year. And then COVID came along, and we're we thought maybe more updates were more helpful, so we went to once a month. And then that became too much, and then so we kind of backed off of that. And so I think we realized that probably once a year is probably not quite enough, and once a month is too much. So I think we're looking at sort of a 2 to 3 times a year schedule going forward from now. I do apologize. It's been a period of time in between this and the last update meetings. It's not that we didn't care. We should have had them, and there was a lot of pieces that kind of factored into that. But I do apologize. There was no intention of not having more regular update meetings. It just was one of those things with all the other pieces that were being shuffled. It just slipped my mind, and so that's totally on me. And I am very sorry. It's not fair to the church family to not have more regular updates. It's important for all of us to know what God's doing, where we're at, where we're going, and so that's completely on me, and I do apologize for that. A couple things on the delays for that, and these are not excuses; these are just sort of reasons. So it's been an unusual period, I would say, of both spiritual growth and spiritual struggle in the church family. And sometimes struggle and growth are somewhat related too. So those are not completely detached from each other. And so with those comes a lot more behind the scenes pieces that are maybe they're not visibly seen on a Sunday or in a life group or in an outreach event. And so those are what we as individuals, as followers of Jesus, sort of live for. We want, we're eager to have God do those improvements in our life, to do that work in other people's lives. It also does take a certain bandwidth to do some of those, and they tend to come in batches all at the same time, And so there's pieces that we've learned from this phase that we're looking to do differently and even equipped differently. So as those seasons come, they seem to come in sort of waves, that we're better equipped to do that in the future, and that won't have such an effect on that. But that is certainly one reason for that. So another reason for that, and I said I'm not making excuses, just sort of the reality of it, is so I'm thrilled to be the pastor and God's calling in that. The other piece is I'm also just a follower of Jesus too. And so both of those pieces are there. And this last year's been a really challenging year, I would say. Sort of trying to figure out, I'm not the most reflective person in the world. I might be the least reflective, but not the most reflective person. And so the trip, I can't look at any of you guys. You guys are hosts. But anyway, so just sort of dealing with a period of burnout, exhaustion, fatigue, some depression mixed in with there. I'm really grateful. I want to kind of I share that with you not because I'm looking for pity prayer I would definitely take. But just in the sense of that is a factor of why some things have not moved as quickly as they could have, maybe should have. I say that, I don't mean to say that to freak anybody out. There's no crisis of faith. There's no crisis in my family. The grace of God is completely there, and I'm so grateful for that. There's no lack of love for the church family. So grateful to be a part of the church family. And so, you say, well, what caused that? Well, the causes are sort of multiple. Some outside of my control. It was a really challenging 2 to 3 years prior to this last year. And I don't think I always dealt with things. My method of dealing with things is just ignore and push on. It works until it doesn't. So for those of you who try that, and some of that was due to loss, some of that was due to some betrayal. I also, and this is a piece where this is truly a confession. I didn't have really great rhythms. One of the 10 Commandments is Sabbath. Feels like one I should kind of pay attention to. I think I've had reasons historically for it's a struggle, right? So, but that being said, I was just I'll figure that out later. Well, after 20 years of figuring it out later and not actually figuring it out later, eventually, God actually put that there for our good. It's a really amazing thing, And so, trying to be more obedient in that area and more, I'll just leave it at that. Obedience is probably a good word for that. And then I think part of it also was caused by just sort of isolation of thoughts and walk with God, and that she's fine. She's totally fine. So anyway, and it's not an isolation physically I'm here, and I think my heart's toward you, but just sort of I'm I don't want to burden anyone else with anything I'm going on, so I'll just deal with my own stuff and worry about that later. And then what that turned out to be is I just won't deal with anything. I'll just worry about it later. And so anyway. All that being said, I'm here today exceptionally grateful for the goodness of God. I'm exceptionally grateful for His care. I'm exceptionally grateful for my family. I'm exceptionally grateful for the church elders who have been very supportive and very caring, and I've been very transparent with many of you as well. You've been hey, what's going on? You're acting different. I'm here's where it's at. So, but the negative, and I say all that not because I want this to be focused on me. I just say that because that has been a big part of the delays in some of the other things that you're saying. Hey, why aren't there more this or that? And those are very fair. And if I had been more obedient to Sabbath principles, 20 years ago, the delays probably today may not have happened. And so for that, I am sorry. But I'm grateful where God's got me today and where we're heading. So anyway, that's just a piece I just want to throw out there. So I'm more than happy to answer any questions about that, probably privately. I don't promise answers, but you're welcome to ask questions because I don't always have all the answers. So that's why I don't promise answers. Our format today is going to largely be, we as a church family, we've divided into 5 large ministry divisions. And so some of these may be super familiar, some of these may not be familiar. So first one is large groups. That's Sunday services, that's big collective gatherings. The names are really creative. You can tell we want to make sure they were understandable. The second, small groups. So this would be life groups, Bible studies, those opportunities that we gather in smaller groups, sometimes digitally, remotely, sometimes in person. Outreach is our outreach events to the community, our sharing of the gospel with the community. Also, we've moved missions under that category because really, like what missionaries are doing, we should be doing here. Like we should all be missionaries where God's put us, and so that's communicating the gospel to people who don't know Jesus, and that's both a gift and a responsibility. Youth programs is the newest division that's come about in the last 2 years. So youth programs is basically from birth to graduating high school. That's what the focus of youth programs is. And just that we want to make sure as a church family we're doing everything we can to share the gospel with them that equip that age group. That is a critical age group. And then shared services that's kind of overseeing resources that are shared between the different ministries. So, like I said, very creative naming. We've worked hard to set these up over the last year and a half, and we've got some leaders in place for them. We've got one that we had a leader in place, and then due to life, we're looking for a different leader there. So I'm currently leading the large group. Kevin Lawson, who is not with us today, he is in Kenya. Kenya, right? I'm saying that right? Okay, yes. Kenya, he is leading the small groups. So he's been doing the announcements regarding Bible studies, pieces like that. Outreach is the one that we're working on refilling that one. Youth programs was Anna Blaisdell, led that for a year while she was here, did a phenomenal job. Bethany has taken over from that. And then Bruce is doing leading shared services. So we'll be posting these in more places. Part of the reason we share this is because if you've got questions in these different areas, these are the point people for these different areas. So if you're like, hey, I'm looking to start a small group or a Bible study, like Kevin would be the one to be talking to on that. Or I'm curious about youth programs or doing a youth program, or where does my kids fit into something. Youth programs would be the one. So that's why we'll be publishing these more so that you know where to go for these. So our format today is largely going to be in sequence with this. So we're just going to kind of go through these areas. Obviously, Kevin and Bruce are both traveling today, which is unfortunate. But Kevin has given a sheet that we're going to be reading through, and Bruce has a video that he recorded. And then he said I could say anything else I wanted to on the end of that, which seems like a mistake, Bruce. But, we'll go with that. So a couple of just reviews over the last period of time. For large group, I just want to look at some of the series that we've gone through. We started off the year with an emphasis in prayer. Us connecting, communicating, listening to God, different types of prayer that we need to be incorporating. We did finish the series on the unstoppable kingdom through the book of Acts. I think it's easy to think of ourselves in just like what God's doing here or today or tomorrow, and yet that we're in not just the church age is 2,000 years old, and then what God's been doing, and we're going back to Abraham and Moses and seeing that journey. So God's graciously dropped us in the middle of an incredible trajectory already, and an incredible flow there. We had the You Asked For It series this summer, which was awesome, and you guys asked some very hard questions. And I think as a church family, we had a lot of great conversations around that, some difficult conversations. And I think there's some really good, some really important questions. There are parts of the scripture that we as a culture naturally really easily align with. Maybe we don't actually mean it in the same way, but we naturally easily align with it. And then other ones are really challenging. But the gospel's always been countercultural. And Jesus isn't here to affirm our culture. He's not here to... he's actually here saying, hey, this is what it is to be a follower of Jesus. The Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5, 6, 7, 8. He's saying, hey, this is what the kingdom of Jesus looks like. And so you're living in the kingdom of Jesus. This is what it's supposed to look like. This is who you're supposed to be. So I was blessed by the series. It was a challenging one. I know a lot of outside conversations were had through that, and I'm really encouraged. I think some of those conversations are still ongoing. And that's awesome because these are things that should impact our everyday life, not just a Sunday morning. And then we're just kicking off the series, The Promise. A couple weeks into that, I'm truly, really excited about that because I think it's awesome that we're kind of walking down the journey that those who would have been living when Jesus were born, they were very mindful of their history. They were very mindful of the Old Testament. They had large sections of it memorized. So for them, they were wrestling with those promises. I think sometimes we think, oh yeah, the Bible starts in Matthew, and we're picking it up from there, and yet we get to see this whole journey that God's bringing his people and us in this plan of redemption on. And so we are covering large swaths of Scripture in this, and so there's some summary and there's some building out of that, but I think a really exciting series there. The other pieces that we get to enjoy in the large group this last year, baptisms. Man, baptism Sundays are always awesome. I just love that. It's a celebration of the work that God's done in our lives, and each story is different, and there's no story that's more special or more majestic than another, right from the youngest child to the oldest adult. Those are so good for our hearts. Certainly, we always want to see more of those because that's a reflection of a significant act of God in the lives. And then there's a little argument over this between youth programs and large group, but it's been a while since we've done child dedications. Youth programs would say we have never done one. I would say we have done them. But, it's a matter of a dinner time conversation over whether it's but nonetheless, I'm really grateful this year, and this did come out of youth programs, that focus rather than just I don't mean to sound this in a small way, but it's not just praying or highlighting parents of kids, but the opportunity for parents to commit to raising their children for Christ, and the opportunity for the church family to also commit to support and love and encourage the parents in doing that. I think it was something really special that we saw this year that was new, and that we plan to keep and do going forward in the future. Like I said, I would like it on record that I still don't think it was the first time we've done it, but we did it in an elevated way is how I would say that. And I'm really grateful for the elevated way in which we did that, because sometimes we say that kids are the next generation of the church. In some ways that's true, but they're also if they're followers of Jesus, they are the church now. And so having that opportunity to be deliberate and to be caring and to be thoughtful, and it's not something, I think it's something if we're not careful, we fall into the same trap that those followers of Jesus did. It's hey, we adults want to talk to Jesus, and Jesus is no, the children are important to me. So I think it's a good opportunity for all of us, and a good reminder of that. So the child dedications were new for large groups this year. Let's see, small groups. I've got two highlights. This is from Kevin, so I'm going to just read through this. Excuse my lack of reading abilities. So update on fall small group ministries. So in the survey of congregation, there was a lot of interest in participation in adult Bible study. We've launched 5 group studies with about 40 plus people participating, which is awesome. That's a really good percentage. We're really encouraged by that. We have an everyday discipleship for men. It does not meet every day, despite its name. It meets on Tuesday nights, and there's about 10 men involved in there. There's 2 different studies on God's comfort, meeting for women, a Tuesday night one, and then a Friday morning one. There is a Power of a Woman's Words. That's on Monday nights. That's bi-weekly. And there's about 14 women in that one. And then there's a pre-sermon study group, men and women, on Sunday mornings. That's weekly. Kevin notes that it's still early on for these groups. So if anyone's interested in joining a group, you've probably only missed one session so far. So, you look smart enough to be able to catch up is what he's saying, I think. So if you can contact him by email, that's preferable for him. And I'll have the email up here in just a second. I probably should have put it right here, but I'll get that to you. Also, a couple weeks back, did the adult ministry survey results. So with some possible new ministry initiatives coming out of that. Thank you for all those that took time to do this survey. A couple things that Kevin summarizes from the survey. There's a significant interest in a group for senior adults. There is a significant interest in a community service and outreach group. And then there are several people interested in organizing groups for these following categories. So mission support, visitation, young marrieds, parents of young children, parents of youth, and then young adults. Let me get the piece there. So he said we're going to be exploring these options, look for the announcements of information meetings with people with similar interests can meet and discuss the needs, and then explore ways to address them. So Kevin's email's here. I'm going to pause right here. Any questions, comments on these two categories? If you're also looking for his email, you can just take a picture of it with your phone. Is it wrong? Yeah, I mistyped it. Yep. If you send an email to that email address, nothing will happen. So if you spell Kevin correctly, that will actually work better. I don't know if, Brianna, can you fix that? Well, yeah. See, give it up for the tech team. These guys are awesome. Yeah. Wow, that's, of all the places to misspell something, an email's like probably the worst. Like, okay. Anyway, apologies. So now you can take a picture of this, and it'll work. Any questions, large groups, small groups? Beautiful. We're going to go to youth programs now, and I'm going to let Bethany take that.
When I speak on the fly like Andrew does, I ramble. So you're welcome. I typed it out. I will.
Thanks, Mike.
I will. I can. Is it on, Dave? I think I'm just not talking into it, Dave. I think it's on. It's on. I just need to project with my teacher voice. You all want my teacher voice? All right. So youth programs umbrellas children and souls from birth to graduation and their families. It's broken up at GracePoint. It's broken up into two groups. We have Grace Kids and we have Catalyst. Grace Kids meets on Sunday mornings. That group covers birth to 6th grade. And then Catalyst meets on Wednesday nights, and that covers 6th grade through graduation. If you caught the repetition and you remember middle school, you'll remember that, yes, there's a strategic purpose for our repeating our 6th graders. The goal for our youth programs is, pause. Who here was saved before age 18? Let me see it. Okay, hold it up. Who here wishes they were saved before age 18? Yeah, there we go. Okay. So according to Children's Ministry statistics, 66% of all believers have made their profession of faith before they turn 18 years old. The goal and ministry of our youth programs here at GracePoint, before God and before our families, is to intentionally teach God's word in age-appropriate ways. Grace Kids and Catalyst are not merely babysitting for the younger ones, and they're not a social club for our older ones. They are about evangelism, which is teaching them to love God, and they are about discipleship, which is teaching them to love others. Keep going, Bree. All right. So I'm going to take you back a little bit because we haven't updated for youth programs in a while, so bear with me here. We're going to start in 2019 when we moved into the building, because often Grace Kids is on the other side and everybody's like, what is going on back there? They are just, we're crazy fun back there if you ever want to come join us. In 2019, when we moved into the building, Grace Kids was finally able to expand into 5 age-appropriate groups. We have babies, toddlers, preschooler, elementary, and finally we had something for our middle school kids. We had about 45 regularly attending children, and we had about 35 volunteers. We were able to teach solid Bible lessons at each of the group levels. We were growing in numbers, but more importantly, the kids were growing in their relationship with God, and it was So exciting. In 2019, Catalyst started to shift a little bit. To understand Catalyst, we have to go back even further. So we travel back further when the church began in 2011. There were 11 adults and 1 baby, Brianna. Young families stayed, but families with teens wanted a more established youth group, understandably. So most families with teens ended up moving along. But there were some people in the church that really had a heart for teens. And so they literally drove their cars up and down Hill Street and Bacon Street, inviting any kids that were on the streets to come to the park to play. While this may seem a little unconventional, it worked. And Catalyst, our church youth group, was born with mostly local community kids. They would meet at the park, and they would meet at the community center because at the time we were renting a space, and we only had space on Sunday mornings. When the church moved over from the Mill to Adams Street, we had a little bit more time in the building, and so we were able to get the kids there. Since many of the kids, the local kids, walked, they still came to Adams Street. And so then youth groups shifted to this blended space where we had some church teenagers and a lot of community teenagers meeting together. But as time went on and the teens grew older, they started getting jobs, they started graduating out, and many of our local community teens, since their families were not living for Christ, they lost interest in God. And so that started shifting even more. This brings us back to 2019. We moved into this building. By then, our youth group had shrunk, and the Garners, who have faithfully served our youth group at that point for 7 years, now 10 years, they had young children, and so they moved the youth group over to their house. It was just much more sustainable, and with a small group, it worked. Then 2020 came, COVID hit. We reached out to families regularly, Grace Kids did, and Catalyst did, asking how we could help them, support them. At first, our families were very overwhelmed. Some of them were hunkered down. Their kids couldn't get sick because if their kids got sick, they couldn't see their parents and grandparents. And so everybody just kind of made a bubble, and Grace Kids and Catalyst wasn't part of the bubble. And then, I need to stick to the script. Here we go. As schools started back up, virtually, families didn't want their kids on extra technology. Very understandable, neither did we. But interacting with these families became really tricky. We got creative, but as group meeting restrictions continues, Grace Kids started focusing more on supporting families than on investing in the kids. And Catalyst starts focusing more one-on-one with their teens, so you have your Catalyst leaders reaching out, connecting one-on-one more so. GracePoint started meeting in the parking lot, and as soon as the weather was warm, Grace Kids invited the kids to come to the backyard with us. We had kiddos from 0 to 14, 15 years old. We didn't care. Like, anybody was welcome in the backyard with us. We would teach them 1 verse a week. We tried memorizing it together. We did songs, but as you can probably imagine, having ages 0 to 14 wasn't the most age-appropriate content all the time, and it didn't work super stellar. I mean, it was great. We loved it. Jesse and I had fun. But we're not sure how much the kids learned. Our goal was not necessarily even that they learn at that moment. Like, the kids have been out of church for a year and a half. Our goal was that they know that the church cared about them, and that we did. When we started getting back into the building in 2021, we started with family rooms. So we opened up the Grace Kids room. We turned on the TVs where they could see the message and the songs back there, and family groups would get together. And again, we were trying to keep the kiddos and their germs away from those who have more vulnerable immune systems. And so we separated everybody, and we used the Grace Kids spaces for that. As the restrictions started lifting, we looked around, and most of our 35 volunteers were in a different season of life. Some had moved away, some had moved on, some had medical reasons why they couldn't invest anymore. And And so as God provided volunteers, we did start adding groups. We started with our first group was ages 0 to 4. If you've worked with young children, you know that's a big span. So not a lot of Bible teaching went on, but this age group allowed our parents to come back to service once or twice a month so that they could get equipped to raise their kids for Christ. And at the beginning, that was the goal. Like, let's breathe back into the parents so that they can invest in their children. In 2021, when we were starting back up, Catalyst relaunched, mostly with all my Grace babies. So now they had a big group again because all my Grace kids had graduated into youth group, and they relaunched more with church kids than with community kids. And so if you look at today's Catalyst, you're going to see a little bit more of a church group than a community group, and so now they're trying to shift back to pulling in those local kids. 2022 and 2023, in Grace Kids, we're rebuilding years. Currently, Grace Kids has 36 children, ages 0 to 12, who call GracePoint their church regularly. Ideally, we would have 5 different groups to break these kiddos up in, and we would teach them on their age-appropriate level. Ideally, we would have 2 leaders in the groups at all times for accountability, for safety, for quality control, for a million reasons, which I have soapboxes I will share with you if you want. Ideally, we'd have 2 adults in each room at all time. Also allows our, I praise God for the 11 volunteers that we do have that serve back there. 4 of them serve every single week. And so please don't hear me and say Beth is ungrateful. I love my 11 volunteers. They are amazing, especially the 4 that are back there every week. But I never cease to pray for what we need. And so I know you see the slide and it's daunting. We need 15 volunteers. And it probably sounds like Beth is crazy. I am. But I'll never stop praying for that because that's what we truly need to do right by these children. All right, back to script. Please don't think that there's anything wrong with GracePoint or Grace Kids. If you look at our national statistics across America, most of our churches are only back 50% in their children's programming, in their children's attendance, and in the amount of volunteers that they have. So this isn't a GracePoint specific need. This is a church need. And it's not all about the numbers. Please hear me. It's not all about the numbers, but every single number represents a soul, and souls matter. And I will not cry. 2022 and 2023 for Catalyst have been growing years. We currently have 13 teens that attend every Wednesday night. They have a game time, and then they dig into God's Word. Often I'm here on Wednesday nights working on Grace Kids, and I get the privilege of hearing them. Oh, it's amazing. Our kids love Jesus so much. This group is focused on discipleship, but regularly has outreach activities in which they invite their local teens to join them. You will see our teens at GracePoint on almost every serving team. You'll see them in the tech booth. You'll see them at the door greeting. You'll see them ushering, communion prep. They're junior helpers in Grace Kids. They're in the cafe. Our teens are amazing. Half of them attended the Christian Life Beliefs class, or you missed that one.
No, that's small.
Okay. All right. Half of them attended Christian Life Beliefs class, which was pretty intense Bible doctrine, if you were able to attend it. It was amazing to watch our teens dig into that. And while Catalyst doesn't need any volunteers on a Wednesday night right now, what they really need, when I asked them, was bottled water. How easy peasy is that? Apparently, when the kids play games, they get hot and sweaty and stinky and thirsty. So if you would like to donate to Catalyst, bring in all the bottled water. You can drop it off on the counter outside the kitchen, and that's how you can help Catalyst right now. If you'd like to get involved in Grace Kids, we'd love for you to try a day. We have both teaching and non-teaching roles. I know some of you are like, I don't do kids. We even have a role in the hallway where you don't have to see the kids. You just walk the hallways and ask the teachers, do you need help? You call the parents. So we have teaching and non-teaching roles. See me afterwards if you would like to jump in there and invest in souls. All right, and then I just want to end with this quote that I believe summarizes the heart of the leaders of our Grace Kids and Catalyst volunteers. This is by Steve Chang of the Gospel Coalition. And he says, one of the biggest mistakes I've seen among those who have a heart for the lost is that they don't see the children in their own church as lost. Every child, even the cute ones in our Sunday school, which we have a lot of cute ones, needs the gospel. Our goal is not just to get children into the church, but into Christ. So if the church is to be missional, let's be missional with those closest to us, the ones who are already inside our church walls.
Okay, so now this is shared services. So I'm going to let them play the video, and then I'll transition that afterwards. This is Bruce coming from, I'm not sure where.
Hello, GracePoint. It's good to be with you virtually. Karen and I are traveling. This is Bruce, and we're down in Mayberry in North Carolina. How many of you know where that is? It doesn't actually exist, but we found it, and we'll be here for another week or so. And thank you. This is not live. This is a pre-recorded video, but thanks to Oleg and others in the tech booth, we're able to watch this and are attending this update meeting along with you. I wanted to take a few minutes just to let you know that a ministry exists that is kind of behind the scenes. Many of you may have never heard of it, Shared Resources. You know, we've been in GracePoint, GP 329 here at 329 South Street for about 4.5 years. And 2.5 years of that have been a struggle as we went through COVID and moved our services outdoors and lost many of our folks who were attending lives. Most have come back, some haven't. So it's been a struggle. But I wanted to let you know that since we've been at GP 329, some of you may not call it by that, but that was the name of the project as we were moving into this building to have church here. When we moved in, we obviously discovered that we were going to have a lot more resources, a lot more infrastructure to take care of, and a ministry was set up aside from ministries that evangelize and disciple to adults and children in the community. This is kind of behind the scenes, and it's the resource that manages things that don't belong to a specific ministry. For instance, tables that you sit at when you have hot dogs on a Sunday after service, or computers that are used either in the foyer, in the commons, in the sound booth, some of the equipment up on the stage. Much of that is, of course, used by, for instance, the worship team and Sunday services, but it's also shared on occasion. We have special events and what have you. So I oversee shared resources, and we try and accommodate everybody who leads a ministry as well as those who are in the building or on the property. During COVID, we took a big hit financially and body count-wise. So we're still recovering from that. And some of the things that we maintain have taken a back seat to supporting the spreading, the sharing, the love of Jesus to the community, to you folks, to each other. And, you know, we had, for instance, we had air conditioners this summer that needed to be repaired. And it took longer than it normally would have because we were prioritizing available funds and resources. Do we fellowship on Sundays and share meals and music and time together, or do we fix the air conditioners so that we will be absolutely comfortable? The fence in the backyard has been laying on the ground since the past winter and a half ago. And we look forward to repairing that, but right now it has not been one of our priorities. So I wanted to let you know about an opportunity to participate in supporting the church. One, if you see something that needs to be repaired, there's an online form that you can go to, and I'll put the, let's see which, no, it's over this shoulder. I'll I'll put a QR code up here and also let you know that you can go to the website or click on this QR code, and it will take you to an online form that allows you to let us know about what is in disrepair, or what is it that you suggest would be better if we had this piece of equipment, or if it was repaired in this way, or reconfigured in a certain way. Please let us know that. Also, we want to develop an opportunity for you to give and support shared resources as a ministry, so that all of our other ministries will thrive. For instance, do you think that we should have picnic tables in the front of the building so that when we have meals, we can flood out onto the grass and onto the lawn and eat out there? Is that something that you personally want to support? Please let us know that. The forms that are out back on the resource table, or the form that you can fill out by going to this QR code and let us know about these improvements that could take place. You can deposit the paper forms in the same places, the same boxes where you put Connect cards and where you put your gifts and tithing. Eventually we may have a different suggestion box for these, but for the time being, you can put those in those collection boxes, and we'll obviously take note of what it is that needs to be done and put it in along with the list of other things that need to be done. And above and beyond that, if you want to give, besides your normal tithing, if you want to give to support one of these ministries, you can also go, again, by going to this form online, this QR code, and go to the giving app. You can specify funds that you give for specific projects or new things. If you think that we should add an addition, put a second story on the building, and you want to fund that, it's obviously not a great analogy, but please list that and donate towards that. Encourage others to participate in the giving towards that if it's a huge project, and we'll certainly consider that. And whatever it is that you submit or you give, whatever you offer, we will take that up at elders meetings and see where our priorities are. So again, thank you. We'll see you in another week or so, and God bless.
I guess I'm glad Bruce found a place that doesn't exist. And just for the record, second story is just a joke. There's nothing there. Yeah, no second story. Outreach. And so, like I mentioned before, one of the changes this last 2 years is that outreach, we used to have like missions kind of separate from like local outreach, and then we're not really sure why, because it's sort of the same thing, just location is different. So outreach has been from the very start of the church, has been a category that we've thought major in a significant way about, but bringing foreign missions kind of into that same piece is important. So, let's see, my remote's not, yeah, there we go. So this will encompass both foreign and local. One of the things that we're doing on the foreign mission side of things is starting this next month, we're reincorporating, we had this prior to COVID, we're reincorporating like a monthly missionary update. The letters are posted out there, and there's other ways of getting that, but I think it's really important that it's not just financial support, but that we're prayer support, that we connected with the missionaries that we are supporting. And so that will be highlighting like a sort of a spotlight on missions sort of once a month. It'll be on a non-communion Sunday, but just a way to kind of keep them present in our minds and our hearts, and bringing them before the throne of God. So going back to 2018, 2019, we did a lot of events, block parties. Some of those slowed down a little bit with the facility build out here. A couple things I wanted to sort of mention about those. So one, the location where we were at before was really ideal in some ways for that, because we were right downtown, is easy accessibility for a walking community. Moving here was truly, I think, a providential act. I mean, there was so many ways that it should not have happened, would not have happened, could not have happened, and God really just knocked down a lot of sort of impossible or barriers that felt impossible. And so we really feel like this was God's leading, God's provision leading us here. And then we got here, and we weren't even in we were in the renovation process. It was almost a year. And then we weren't even in here a year before COVID put us outside, well, online and then on the parking lot. So some of those block party things, shifted as far as that. I would also say what maybe we don't perceive as much is that at the same time, so we moved locations, COVID hit, and at the same time, our community shifted quite a bit at the same time. My guess is that what was happening anyway, and it would have happened, but COVID really, we know a lot of out-of-staters moved to the town. You might have noticed, real estate got really expensive. And so it really shifted a lot of demographics in Biddeford and Saco because the rest of the world recognized what we already recognize as this is a pretty good place to live. And so with that everything, the cost and stuff increased on that. Now, there was two things that we were always trying to accomplish with block parties. The obvious was we were trying to reach people who didn't know Jesus and show them the love of Jesus and have opportunities to communicate the gospel. The less obvious is that we were trying to encourage followers of Jesus to get out of our comfort zone and actually have those conversations. Now, maybe we didn't always tell you about that because we didn't want to scare you, but that's part of what we were actually always trying to do is develop in us as followers of Jesus the ability to reach beyond ourselves, our comfort zone, our natural inclinations, our natural circle of comfortable people, and communicate the good news of Jesus to others that didn't know him. So now on the other side of I think we can safely say we're on the other side of COVID, our goal remains the same. We're still under the Great Commission that go into all the world and share the gospel, preach the gospel, proclaim the gospel to every creature. The mandate is still the same. How we do that may look a little bit different. One thing we added this last year, I think is a really awesome way of doing that, was we had to Remember the Darkness service. That was an amazing opportunity to share the gospel. It was a Good Friday service. We had not done that previously in the history of the church. We felt like there's an opportunity to do that, and the gospel conversations that resulted were awesome. Now, that is different than how we didn't have that 5 years ago. That's different, but yet still our mandate from Christ is the same, and so it's a way of fulfilling this mandate. Christmas Eve is also a similarly awesome opportunity to share the gospel. And I say this is not just, it's not just here, but it's the conversations leading up to it. It's the inviting family and friends. It's the conversations afterwards. It's a tool for connecting people with Jesus who loves them incredibly much and died for them. But I think what COVID maybe revealed is that, and I think this remains the same, is that there's really no substitute ever for personal outreach. There's no event that can be put on. There's no extravaganza, palooza, festival thing that could be done that beats someone who cares about another individual sharing the good news of Jesus with them. And that is if many of us look at our stories, it wasn't an event that brought us to Jesus. It was a person that had the Spirit of God in them that brought us to Jesus. And that is really, I think, always will be and remains the ultimate piece. Now with this, we are currently looking into ways of how can we equip and enable and even track better as followers of Jesus in this area. Now, I love it when people are like, hey, I know someone and I want you to talk to them about Jesus. And I'm like, score for me, right? Because this is awesome. I love to do that. But also, we want to develop everybody's skills so that you can have that same joyful experience. Don't bring me all the dessert, right? It's kind of what we're saying. We want you to enjoy that experience and that walk with them, with God. And so, as a church family, we're looking at some options right now. We're wrestling through some of that. Is that outreach is something that we do together, but part of that outreach is that it's our neighbors and our friends and our coworkers and our family members that we are connecting to, that we're praying for, that we're loving, and that we are sharing the gospel with. So we do things collectively as a church family, and that is really important, and we will continue to do it. We've taken advantage of the the fall festivals, taking advantage. I'm so grateful to have families with young kids in the church. That is awesome. I don't want to ever be frustrated with that. That is so awesome. I'm so glad to see that. So we take advantage of the opportunities that God brings to us. We want to maximize as well. We want to look for opportunities collective. But I think the last couple of years has really emphasized in our hearts is that it's the individual piece that we really need to equip and further develop, so that our skills, and sometimes when we think of this, we think of someone who's really, really great at apologetics and they could debate and go on YouTube. I think there's a realm for that if it's done in a kind and soul-caring for way, but maybe most of what people were called to reach is not at that level. They just need to hear the gospel from someone who cares about them and loves them. So outreach is, like I said, if we think of outreach as just block parties, we're we're not doing as much outreach as a church family. And I can definitely understand that perception. I would also say we've pivoted to do some new opportunities that we didn't have previously, but then we're also really working on how do we develop each one of us as followers of Jesus to share the gospel, to share that good news. Because really, if we've been affected by that good news, then we have a responsibility and an opportunity to further communicate that good news. So outreach, we want to look at, so we're kind of broadening this from just events to looking at, we're foreign missions, we're including that in here, the missionaries that we support, we're building some pieces there, and then we're also going to be looking at building in some further ones on that personal, individual level to equip each one of us better to share the gospel of Jesus. So that's kind of how we're looking at outreach there. Any questions on outreach, shared services, youth programs? Yes?
Sure, I'll ask questions.
Perfect.
Let's go to shared services first. I know that when we completed the 329 project, there were several phases that still had to be worked. I know that that's some of our fiscal limitations. What do we still have to do? What is hanging over our head? Where are we going on those? Like Bruce touched on, we're not doing air conditioners because of money. We're not doing the bus, which I haven't seen the bus, so I was hoping that was...
No. Bus is sold. Yeah. So, okay, great question. So the question was basically there's a couple of projects when we moved in here. They were on time delays, a couple of pieces. So the bus, thanks to Mike helped us. Well, I say helped us. He did sell that, for the church. So one of those pieces where when we were downtown in Adams Street, it was a real tool for connecting people. Also, as our community changed and we no longer had the walking community that was even present in town, we felt like the cost for maintaining it and running it was not a wise stewardship based on the needs. I mean, we still occasionally will get people that ask for rides, but it's handled on a one individual basis. And a lot of us have helped out with that over time, and that's great. So the bus is sold, so that side of things. Air conditioners we were working on, and we're thankful for individual in the church family who's really gifted at that. Part of that was actually we didn't think it seemed like it was one problem, and it turned out to be a little bit more extensive. So he was chasing it over a period of weeks, and then a couple of the parts they gave him worked backwards for unknown reasons to him. The motors ran backwards, so it took a little bit of time to get to that stage. So there was a couple, the outstanding projects from the town. There's really only one that's sort of quote unquote outstanding, and it's been challenging getting an answer from the town. COVID threw everybody, including the town, into a lot of disarray. So the one would be connection of sprinklers system to the city water. We've tried chasing that down. We've tried chasing contractors down to get that. We've tried multiple times to kind of make that connection. We have been unsuccessful at getting contractors to do it, communication from the city. Our fire system, suppression system is fully operational, so there's no safety issues with that. I mean, when they put it, if you go in, there's a back room here that has 2 massive tanks of water, and they spec buildings as most of Maine doesn't have city water percentage-wise. So they spec buildings for city water and non-city water. And so they installed the non-city water spec with connecting later. So that's something like we have worked on in the past. We've kept the funds available in case that they decide that they do want to revisit that. But they've not been, like, we haven't been able to get any answers from them or from excavators as far as actually doing it. So that's kind of gone to the back burner, but the funds have been kept aside for that. In case, we ever unbury ourselves from COVID. Safety of the church family, they are fully operational. When we initially talked to and even some of the conversations with the town, and this is a little bit challenged. They were great to work with. The facility was pretty distressed when we purchased it, and I say pretty distressed pretty lightly. The project, we had an initial meeting before we put a contract on the building. The town had an initial scope and sequence. We had initial scope and sequence. Throughout the project, our scope and sequence changed, and the town's scope and sequence changed multiple times. I think at the end of the day, we got a better product, and I think it was managed exceptionally well, but many of those pieces did change over time, and so it's even a little bit difficult to know on a couple of those pieces exactly what the current expectations are on that. So like I said, we've tried multiple times, but they're still unburying. A lot of code enforcement went virtual inspections, and so the people are safe, which I think is our biggest concern. As far as fire and safety, we have a responsibility to all God's children to keep them safe. That would be the big one that's outstanding, if you will. So, did I answer all the questions, Bus? Yeah. Air conditioner. Perfect. I like that. Okay, finances overview. I'm going to hit the overview, and then Greg.
A little bit more about outreach. Are we, as you know, plays a lot in outreach and everything. Is it our aim to bring outreach back as important as it was in the past? And we got events coming up, maybe Trick or Treat, we got Thanksgiving coming up. Are we going to continue going in those directions? Maybe us take it back up to where we were before?
Yeah, so the question was, are we trying to bring outreach back to as the importance level as it was before? I would argue that, if anything, outreach is more,
I guess what I meant is when we have events here, try to get people to come in, that's what I meant.
Yeah.
More cooking, hamburgers, hot liquor, whatever, things like that.
Yes. Yeah, so as far as some of the events go, I think some of the events we've substituted. So we didn't have a Fall Fest before because there wasn't a need or connectivity before, right? So that's kind of come about the last 2 to 3 years. I think the first year was we just found out everyone's parking in the parking lot, and we didn't know what they were doing in the parking lot. And so that was an opportunity that someone drove by on the trick-or-treat night, and they're like, oh, a bunch of people are there. So that's something that's sort of developed to take advantage of an opportunity here. Remember the darkness service, certainly we could have done that before. We didn't. We felt based on a couple conversations, it's something that we were interested in trying. The outreach side effect on that was awesome. It was really good. I think I mentioned, so there are some collective opportunities to share the gospel. We want to continue with those. We want to continue to build those out. There are also individual opportunities to share the gospel, and we want to continue to build out the skills of us as individuals, as families, as small groups, as groups of friends, to effectively communicate the gospel there. So I would say it's hard to say it was more important, because I don't think we ever looked at it as unimportant as a church family. But I think we at least verbally emphasized the group side of outreach, and maybe didn't also emphasize the personal side as much. So we're not trying to say a group is down and personal is up. We're actually trying to say no, there's group opportunities to reach the community, and we really want to hold on to those and maximize those. And at the same time, we also want as individuals to equip, to develop, to pray, so that we are individually also sharing the good news of Jesus with others. So I would like to think of it like we're not in any way trying to bring anything down. Like, even the idea of block parties started out from the community from which we were located, and we were trying to minister to the community in which we were located. The town has shifted a lot in 10 years. I mean, it's shifted substantially. And that's, I mean, you could argue whether that's good or bad. I don't know that that's, like, I think it's just a reality that it has happened. You know, the town has shifted a lot in 10 years. And so our goal is to be the best followers of Jesus for the community as it exists today and that will exist tomorrow. And so what we do, like some things we've stopped doing, like we haven't done a block party recently because we're not in the air, like there's not the need for it. We've started doing Fall Festival because there is a connection point there. So we're looking for the providential bridges that God has already put in place for the group activities. And on the individual side of things, we are working and looking at some opportunities to build out the individual skill side of things. I don't know if it's interesting, you've listened to the baptisms, the stories, and so often the stories are, man, this person loved me, this person shared the gospel with me. And it's not even always about, sometimes it's people coming to a church service is the first step in their journey to God. Sometimes it's the last step in their journey to God. Like, and God is creative like that. Like, he works in a million different ways. So that's not a good or bad. Some people, like, a small group is where they will start, and that's where they'll be comfortable. Some people, it's like fishing or watching football or a motorcycle ride or a coworker or, you know, hanging out with their kids in a park. Like, all of those, sometimes that's where it's at. So no way trying to de-emphasize our opportunities as a collective group, but also trying to say, like, how do we further equip the individuals to do the work of ministry? Yeah.
So why can't we go to them?
What do you mean? The question is why don't we go to them? Where are you talking about? Yeah, so we've done some cookouts historically in the past in some areas, Bacon Street, some others. I would say even part of us going there, and this is maybe the behind the scenes of this, right, is that we're connected with a lot of community partners who we talk to, and they are serving the communities in different ways. So some of them are city, town officials, some of them are nonprofits, some of them are, I guess that'd probably be the groups there. And so a lot of that is we're trying to be responsive to where they're saying the need is now. So those kind of opportunities came up because of a legitimate need to serve there. During COVID, one of the needs, we did this several times as a church family. The food pantry was like, hey, we need food to help cover people. And then at one point, they're like, we can't take food because of, like, COVID restrictions. We need cash. Like, okay, no problem. Like, so part of our goal is to serve the people that Jesus loves, which is everybody. And it's not just us coming up with ideas, we're not against ideas that come from the body, but it's also there's some great community partners who are very connected and that we've relied on repeatedly throughout the years that we're responsive to that. So some of that when we're seeing shifts, it's the community partners, they're seeing shifts of what's needed and helpful. And we're trying to, like, listen to them, listen to the Spirit of God. They might not be followers of Jesus sometimes, but they are very connected to the community and they love the city a lot. So that is part of, like, the behind the scenes conversation, I guess, if you will, that goes into some of that. So I don't know if that answers. I'm trying to answer the question. Yeah, Eric.
If I could, I think one of the big things we need to do in community outreach is pray for somebody that feels called and led to lead that program. I think all of us have a lot of great ideas of what we want to see done, but until we have someone who feels called by the Lord to lead this, we already heard about a pastor that is stressed. We need people to walk alongside him to do these, that you can send them all our comments
Yeah.
Even one for our need for Grace Kids. Those are prayer requests that we need to see.
Yeah. No, and that's, I mean, that's an excellent point, Eric, is that like when we put to be determined in there, we had that filled, and then it was not. But like that is a legit, like we believe in the category, we believe it needs a leader over that, and I echo that a lot. That's something we want to be prayerful about and ask God to perfect fit for that. So, yeah.
I agree with both Greg and Eric. I think that probably outreach is one of the most important things that a church can do, because that's how a church is seen by the community, and that's how other people look at the church and want to join the church is because of outreach. And I think that we don't have enough things that are being done that are well seen by the community, and I also don't think we do a really good job of advertising the things that we do. So I agree. I think it's one of the most important pieces that this church can do is the outreach.
Yeah. Nope, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think it's like one of the things that God left us on earth to do, because we could do a lot of other things in heaven. So, yeah, but reaching people who don't know Jesus is, I don't want to say it's the reason he left us on earth, but it seems like it's a pretty big one, you know, so, yeah, 100%. Sorry, I didn't restate your question. Rick was reiterating just the importance of outreach, and then even the things that we do actually showing that better so that people can see that. So, yeah.
Before we get into finance, I'll throw one more out. We've got these 5 wonderful ministry areas. 2+ years ago, a group was put together as part of what we had called at that time the Align process, to improve our transparency internally, externally, our stewardship, our leadership. There was a proposal for a church, a different style of church leadership team. Where is that?
Yeah. So the leadership team on an ongoing basis is going to be the ministry division leaders, MDLs for short, and then the elders, and it's going to be a combination of that. Part of the reason for that is just the frequency of meeting has been really ramping up, and I think it's a really good thing. It's a necessary thing. But usually these groups are meeting, the ministry division leads are meeting once a month on average, if not, I mean, there's communication between there, but once a month on average. And the elders are usually meeting 2 to 3 times a month. So logistically, trying to get, keep that smaller group to kind of increase the frequency of the meetings has been part of that. The goal with the MDLs is a couple pieces, like you just mentioned. We want the efficiency so that everybody knows, like, hey, if I've got a question, I've got an idea, I've got a opportunity that I see, like, you know who to go to. That's why we're doing this update meeting not in January. We're doing it now because we want everyone to, like, hey, like, this is what we're doing. This stuff will be posted on. We're gonna have a spot here that the information will be. We'll have it posted on the website so you can kind of see. So the contact information is all there, because we really want to continue to build this out to make it more efficient for you, easier. We want to be as there's a couple factors. So you want efficiency, because we don't want to waste a lot of effort in just meeting. We want to actually accomplish things accomplished. We want accountability, which is one of the pieces just mentioned. I think even the Apostle Paul in Corinthians is gathering an offering. He doesn't take the offering by himself. He's doing that with accountability with other people there. So accountability is important, and wisdom is important. No one, like in myself definitely included, is capable of making all the right choices all by yourself. So to re-echo some of the things there, I mean, we want to We want God's, to fill that outreach MDL spot. We want it to be the person that God has for that, right? We want it to be someone's heart. We want it to be a really good fit. So it's not just saying like, oh, we'll throw anybody in. We want it to be a really good providential fit to accomplish that. So those pieces are going on an ongoing basis. So those are like behind the scenes. People aren't seeing those. One of the pieces that's been, like, and I mentioned that earlier, sometimes you're like, well, okay, if all these meetings are happening, well, why isn't more, like some things, why aren't they going faster? And that's a great question. Some of those meetings over this last course of this year have been eating up a lot of bandwidth by spiritual issues that I've been working on. And by the grace of God, a lot of progress has been made on those. Not always. I mean, not all of us don't always say yes to God, right, the first time, or sometimes we're a little slow or a little dense. So some of those issues take time. And Rick's laughing at me because he knows I'm so dense. I think that's what this is about. And he's right. But nonetheless, so that's when we say, if we use the term leadership team, we're talking about a combination of like the MDLs and elders meeting together. So we have collective meetings together there, and then both can have individual meetings as well to try to kind of keep things moving in an efficient manner as possible. So
we've seen who the ministry division leads are, who are the elders.
Great. Thank you. See, shockingly, he's not here on prompt. This is actually great questions. So the elders, I know I got 2 more questions here. I'm not going to leave you hanging. So the question was, who are the elders? The elders are myself, Bruce Audie, and Mark Eschenbrenner currently. So Bruce we saw on video, and Mark is here down front this morning. So. Susie. Yeah, so the question, and correct me if I misunderstood, but so the question is like, on one hand, showing the love of Jesus, but on the other hand, is there a discipleship class for training people on how to do that more so? Like verbally, is that what, did I get it right? Close enough? Yeah, so that's actually what I was mentioning to, it's a great question. Well, that's what I was mentioning to earlier, is that individual training piece. Because the conversations are literally everywhere, but if we're not paying attention to them, or we don't feel equipped for them, we can often miss them, or we get hung up, or we get scared because we don't know what to say. So that training that you're talking about, it's something we're actively looking at right now, and trying to figure out how to help everyone have this conversation. Like I say, I love it when people are like, hey, Andrew, will you talk to them? I'm like, absolutely. But I would also like even more so love for you to be able to share the gospel with them effectively and efficiently. One of the dreams when the church was started back in 2012 was to have a church full of missionaries, and I think that really remains the case. Is that each one of us are personally called and equipped in different ways, in different skill sets. We have different personalities, and I get all that. But we each have unique opportunities that I will never have, and the other elders or ministry leaders they will not have. So for each one of us to be equipped to use the opportunities that God gives us, absolutely. So yes, 100%. We are working on it now. I think there's one other hand. Is it Jeb? Mel. Sorry, I was close. Perfect. Yes. Mel was asking about the elders. Okay. Yeah, great question. Mark. Yes, there is. And that actually does have a component. That's a great point. For the men, everyday discipleship does have a component on sharing your faith with that. And there's some practical exercises that go along with that. So thank you for bringing that up. That's one of the reasons that was chosen as well. It's a great curriculum on that. Okay. I am looking at you. I mean, you get this like teal thing going on. I don't know. Okay. Don't worry, you won't be missing much. I might not be missing much. I hope I'm missing something. My remote is not working right now. So, okay, this is the last category. So financial overview. I just want to kind of run through just a brief history. So when we moved into here, we knew there's the sort of normal ratios for churches. We knew we were a little bit facility heavy at the transition moving into here. Like I said, the confidence in that was just in the how providential God set up and orchestrated and worked through all sorts of other pieces to even make that possible. And we prayed through the whole piece, hey, if God, if this thing not what we want, shut the door, we're not interested. I think even, what we've seen over the last couple of years and just the opportunities that we've had even to bless the school district, among other things, would not have happened. So I'm truly grateful for that. When COVID hit and they said it's 3 weeks or 6 weeks or whatever it was, at that point in time, we expected a delayed impact of that. Now, I didn't expect a 3 or 4 year delayed impact, but there's usually a tail on events. So you have the event and then the impact is kind of trailing with that. So we expected the impact with that. It wasn't, now, like I said, we did not anticipate 3 years or whatever. So really, as a church family, financially, we didn't see any impact negatively 2020, 2021. We had a lot of families move out of state, though, in 2021, which created a delayed impact into 2022 and 2023. With that delayed impact, though, we kind of, I think providentially, we're there's some cash reserves, and we kind of said, let's sit on the cash reserves just because we don't know what the impact of it will be. Nobody did. And we don't know when it'll hit, which we also was true. The other thing that was super helpful is our ministry leads were really great at watching expenses. So all the different ministries, they have done a great job at watching expenses, paying attention to costs. We don't want to cut ministry, but there's some things it's hey, if you can do the same thing in a more efficient way, well, why wouldn't you, right? So that's where we were looking at that, and our ministry leads were really, really great at doing that. So overall, year to date, this year, you can go to the next slide there. Year to date, there's a positive net before principal payments, so that's a good thing. Giving, this is actually pulling out designated giving. So designated giving is Marina Well would be designated giving. There's almost I think about $6,000 given to help her with the legal expenses, which is awesome. So just great. Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's huge. So anyway, but this is pulled out all designated giving because you can't count on designated giving. This is just the regular giving was $110,000. I'm not going to read all the cents. Expenses are $106,000 with about a $4,000 net on that. Either someone swapped my water bottle while I wasn't matching or it refilled itself. That's amazing. So anyway, you're okay, so you say apart from principal payments, the reason I'm not an accountant, but basically because it goes to a balance sheet differently, that's why it pulls out the principal. So the net with the principal payments is actually a negative $21,000 for the year. Brianna, can you get the next slide? So there was about $25,000 in principal payments, so a negative of $21,000 net for the year. Now, that's not where we want to be, but I do have some good news. So I got two pieces of good news for this. So one is the cash reserves. We talked about at the beginning. So even after that, really we didn't see an impact start to happen until 2022 with COVID. Families relocating. Even after all that, we have about over $100,000 in cash reserves sitting there. That's the grace of God working well in advance of our need. Sometimes God provides just right in time, and other times he provides way in advance. And so I'm grateful for both. I like the way in advance better, preferably, but and the other thing I would say is the other piece of good news is that the last 4 months have averaged positive cash flow, and that includes principal payments. So the last 4 months, we're year over year stronger than 2022. So 2023's, has been a positive there. And I say the last even 4 months have been a really stronger one, which is actually a little bit unusual in the history of the church in the sense that summers tend to be, people are gone, they're traveling, life happens. So most of that's been over the summer, and to actually have that sort of the strongest months of the year is actually really encouraging. So, so we're kind of eating away at that deficit now, which is a really awesome thing. My prayer would just be, hey, I'd love to be positive by the end of the year. That would be awesome. That's something easily capable of God doing. I think we're at the spot where, if what we're seeing as the current trend continues, I think that should be there. But we are still continuing to really, we've had conversations with our ministry leads, ask them to really watch the expenses, gone through detailed budgets on that. And so we're trying to be good stewards of what God has, also acknowledging that we believe we're here by the providence of God, and we're really, really grateful for that. And God's done some incredible things with that. But also personally, I think we'd like to be, positive, like net by the end of the year would be awesome to see God do that. So, well within his capacity. When we moved into, one of the phases that we saw when, it's not about the building, I'm just saying this is a way of God's provision. So when God opened up an opportunity for us to be given a free building across town, we prayed about it, we talked to our ministry leads, we sat down, we evaluated the pros and cons, and it really didn't fit what the ministry God calls us to do was. Cool building, I love architecture. It didn't fit the ministry objectives. And so when then God opened this up, we had a group that was like, oh, we'll finance it 100%, really low interest rate. It was a church funding institution, so we're like, perfect. So we put a contract out. As soon as we got it approved, the group said, oh yeah, we're not going to lend in Maine for 2 years. Well, that's handy, And so we brought the need to the church family, and we just said, hey, here's how it's transpired. Here's what God's done. And this was like in November. It's a terrible time of year to talk about money because you got Christmas and Thanksgiving and oil bills starting, and yet within, I think it was a month and a half, like God provided the full down payment for a bank loan in November and December, and it wasn't a master campaign, it wasn't a brilliant marketing strategy. It was just like God providing through his people. So when I look at this goal to be positive by the end of the year, I think it's like, it doesn't seem, in the scope of God's control, it seems like a very small thing, but something I'd still love to pray together as a church family about and towards. So, any questions on, and this one I'll probably defer somewhat to Mark or Rick. Rick is our current treasurer, and he's done an amazing job. We're so grateful for Rick. And Mark's got his computer here, so if there's any detailed questions, we also have detailed P&Ls by month and all sorts of other data that we can send out as well. I just didn't think anyone want me to read through that to you today.
I just want to say, I've been here for more than a couple months.
Yes?
Actually, it's been 12 years, but I got to say to you and to the way the church is always run, how grateful it is to be at a church that values people more than money. You know the reputation it has. All the church does is want your money. I've never felt that way here. Probably never will. And I just want to thank you from the top, that's projected from the top down, that people are definitely more important than the money issue is. And we're not pressured to give, keep giving. You know what I'm saying? It's not the overall reflective of the ministry itself, even though it is important within itself. So I want to say thank you that you reject that kind of service here, and churches don't receive enough recognition for that.
Yeah. Greg was just commenting on his gratitude for the the church prioritizing people over money. And money's a tricky topic because it's personal to all of us. Jesus talked a lot about money. He talks about where money is, our heart is, which, is uncomfortable in reflection at times. But at the same time, 100%, Jesus died for people, not for money. The money's there. It's a resource. It's a tool. Just like our calendar, it's a way of showing priorities. But yeah, it's part of that. So absolutely, Mike.
You and Bruce both mentioned the fence out back needs
Yep.
to be fixed. The air conditioner needs to be fixed this summer. What is there a list at this point of things that need to be done?
Yep.
That some of us, if we can't do it physically, but we can add additional donation or
Yep.
additional tidings to help with what needs to be done, because winter's coming, there's a lot that I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
I know Andy mentioned he has some fencing.
Yeah.
Is there stuff we can do as a group? If we don't know, we can't help.
No, absolutely. That's why, and I appreciate that. So to reiterate Mike's question, hopefully well. So Mike was asking if there's special projects that are needed, special ways of resourcing. So I want to mention maybe just the general approach first, and then maybe hit that more specifically. So obviously we have some reserves available. Some of those reserves could be applied to some of those projects, although the reason we have not yet to date. So there's some maintenance ones like air conditioners that we are working on. We are actively, but like something like the fence, we're like, well, without donated panel, fencing is not cheap. I don't know if you ever tried putting up anything, you're like, oh, it's expensive. So the reserves are there. We don't feel like on a normal, ongoing basis, that level of reserves is necessary for the size church if we were like every month operating in the black, right? So I think part of that is like, we've been really encouraged the last couple of months to see where that's been, and if that trend continues, some of those could be reserved. However, in the meantime, I think to your comment, like there is a list of projects that Bruce has, and I think maybe talking to Bruce about the priority, and it's something like we could say, if God puts in a couple people's heart, hey, we'll want to pitch in, whether that's, like you said, maybe that's labor, time, finances to kind of get a couple of those high priority ones done. I think that would be great. So I think Bruce is back next week maybe, but I can always get you contact information for that as well. So what? Or the form, yeah. But no, that. But,
The form's there for what we see now.
yep.
The question is, what do we already know needs to be done? And I know the fence is no big deal, but it's an eyesore.
Yeah. Well, even. Yeah. Even the fence is part of the conversation. So some of those things, like, okay, we bought it with a fence, we didn't put up a fence, but then you're trying to say, okay, does the fence help ministry? Like, where does it fit in? Is it actually, like, we're not looking to spend money. I mean, it's all God's money, and there's a stewardship over that we want it to be done responsibly. And so that was part of the conversation even at first, was like, okay, so we talked to the youth program, say, like, how does this impact you? How does it look at outreach? Is this something that needs to be done, or should it just be removed? So that's part of the conversation. And that actually has been had at this point in time. So for the youth programs, it would be great to have the fence back up for safe containment of kids, separation from parking lot. Kids don't bounce like they used to, is what I'm told, But
But I think this all goes back to, again, that align process. It was to get that information out. We're going to call ourselves partners. We shouldn't have to dig to know what's on our agenda that we can help with.
Yep.
Whether it be by prayer, by finances, by skills, all of which come from God.
yes, 100%.
So
Everything we have.
there's got to be an intentional sharing
Yep.
of needs for volunteers in these areas. And stupid old adage, communicate, communicate, communicate.
Yep. Yep.
And we need to do that
Yep.
so that we know how we might be able to help.
Yeah, and this is definitely a step towards that. It's not an end all. It's not everything it needs to be. But you're absolutely right. This is why we're having, as a step towards that.
If we don't know,
Yeah, no one's a minor. Yeah.
like don't know,
Mm-hmm.
and some people think I'm in the know because I'm talking to you guys all the time, but yet,
It's not the first thing we talk about all the time.
usually it's all right. But the point is that if, I don't know if there needs to be a list.
Yep.
I don't know if there needs to be something on the website or a place to click, but it needs to be
Yep.
communicated. We can't help if we don't know.
Yeah.
I guess it's the easiest way for me to say what's on my heart and what
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking at this point. I would like to help more.
Yes.
Both of us would like to help more.
Yep.
But if we don't know where or what to do,
I think people will come forward if they know what the need is.
Yep.
Because they will have their gift to be able to give.
Yeah.
Once they know what the need is and how they can give it.
It's honestly one of the things I love about the church family is that I think is generally characterized the heart of that. So yeah, we'll figure out how to communicate that out better because I think there is a list that's been accumulated, and this even is part of what we're trying to go into that. But how do we get that information out in a way that's we're working through the priorities? I mean, some things are like wish lists. Some things are like, hey, this needs to be done. Okay, how are we punching through that list?
I'm not saying to put it out there so everybody in the world can see it,
Yeah.
but there should be something that our church family, our partners,
Mm-hmm.
we can know.
We've tried doing a secure, and I said that the methodology I think is always the tricky piece is like, so how to do that. 'Cause, I mean, the list is there. It's how to connect that. We've tried doing like a secure portal on the website for a while, and I think that became, a lot of people seem like it struggles with that. So I don't know that I have envisioned, like, I agree with what both Eric and Mike you've been saying, and I think I see a lot of other people nodding. So I think it's the logistics of like the how-to that maybe we're struggling more than the actual. Yeah. So that's what. Yeah.
And that could be as simple as snail mail,
Yeah.
because if I get something from GracePoint, I'm gonna open the mail.
Yeah.
Being me.
Yep.
If I get something from Joe Blow selling something, I'm probably gonna discard it.
Your extended car warranty.
Exactly. So, I mean, it doesn't cost that much
Yeah.
to throw a letter out, because then you know it's going to the people it needs to go to.
Yep.
And I know we're in a electronics world and everything is all electronic now, but, you know, if that is safer,
Yeah. That might be a way to do it. That's a good idea. There's different groups for flock notes. So the question was, is flock note just for us? There's different groups there. So flock notes helped a lot. So prior to Eric's alluded to the line process, one of the things we did is we tried to figure out in the church family, what are the primary methods of communication like that everyone prefers. I think we came up with 9 different preferences of primary, ranging from letter to TikTok, you know? And that, I'm not knocking that. It's just one of the challenges of our generation is that, like, I see our collectively is that we have a lot of different age groups preferences, and not all ages are. So flock notes helped a lot as far as that goes. There are groups that are more, and we can even set up a group for those who wanted to get that kind of stuff on a monthly basis.
I think sometimes we give people too many choices. There's no opinion. I think if we decide what line of communication we want to use with people, they have to tune into that line of communication. to
Yeah.
get the information that they want.
Yeah. Josie? So Sunday announcements are tricky. So, one, we try to really keep Sunday announcements to two or three max, because we found that like people just tune out of that. 2, we've tried moving them around to see if so if someone, there used to be at the beginning of the service, you might notice that move. Well, because if you're running 2 minutes late and you got to go to the bathroom and grab a cup of coffee, the announcements are over. So in historically, there's been stuff that like I know we've announced 3 or 4 times, and people are like, "Man, I never knew that it happened." And I'm like, we've said it and it's gone out in email. And then the other rule of thumb we try using is applying to 50% or more of the congregation for like a Sunday service announcement. just because we're as a method of trying to help sort that out. So certainly some of that could be. It might even be more like, I mean, Lori, maybe to your point, maybe you use it just to say, hey, here's where you find, maybe not all the information, but here's where a reminder, here's where you find that kind of stuff. That might be a way to do that. Look, what time are we? What time? Okay. I don't want to get in trouble. Like, hang on, I got Mel real quickly, and then Susie.
Real quick, you know how you go on Blocknote and for potluck you sign up for
Yep.
dessert? Why can't you put on the Blocknote, this is this project, sign up for it, this is this project, sign up for it?
I'm guessing that it is possible. I'm guessing that's very possible. I'm not a Flocknote expert, but we have some in residence.
Sign up thing and people
Yeah, that's a great idea.
say, hey, we need pens, anybody can do that sign up, and it's something that we all
Yeah.
get into with Blocknote.
I think that's actually a newer feature on Flocknote too, which is we started using it, but we haven't used it for the facility piece. Yes, we did. I think it's a newer. Yeah, look at that. I like it. I like it a lot.
Can you describe using,
Mike's getting strangled over here.
you thinking about football? Using the fence as an example, can you describe the process by which a decision is made? For example, with the church bus, as soon as a decision was made
Yeah.
and Mike was connected, that problem was solved like in days.
Well, so I think the church fence is just a template, right? So it was an existing piece of the facility. Okay, it falls down. Well, something obviously has to happen with it, right? I mean, that's like, well, it doesn't have to, but should happen with it. So then the question is like, well, okay, it's going to cost money to tear it down. It's going to cost something to get rid of it, but less so to get rid of it. So then the question is like, well, does it actually help any of the ministries, right? Because if it doesn't help any ministry, like, or significantly help it, well, then you should just get rid of it. Like, you don't need to just build it again just for the sake of, well, it had it when we bought it, so we need to keep it, you know. But there again, but we don't want to assume we automatically know that, right? So then you want to actually talk to a different ministry, like youth programs is one is like, hey, that's really helpful for us keeping kids safe on some of these pieces. So you're like, okay, there's substantial reason for that, right? Which is great, but that's part of the process is like, okay, you know, it's not just like, do we want it or not? I mean, Bus was similar though, right? So Bus was like, hey, it was a really valuable, useful tool to sharing the gospel, connecting people. Like, we've done and accomplished similar things. The changes in our community no longer make it's a cost-benefit analysis that's hopefully prayerful.
So you're speaking to the point which that's the analysis.
Mhm.
I'm asking about the decision. How does that decision, how do you move from analysis to decision?
So I mean, I think that so in this case, I mean, selling the bus was selling the bus was just like a simple one in the sense of like it didn't really substantially benefit any ministry. So COVID actually kind of the reason we kept it through COVID because it was like, well, like what's going to come on the other side of it, right? Well, in the midst of it, the community changed. We had a chance to measure the demand. That was a really easy one because just we didn't feel like once again it's God's resources, right? So like, you know, standing before Him, you're like, well, we don't feel like this is just because we've had one in the past doesn't mean it's a thing we have to keep. You know, so is there a benefit to what's being spent?
Can I help you? So typically it goes on the elders docket, for the elders to talk about. And then from the elders it goes down to the ministry division leads. And then it gets to a mic and then we're on action steps. On the elders docket are spiritual and physical things. And what he's been trying to describe today is that the spiritual has been keeping our elders so busy that a lot of the
Yeah. Some of this is communication of needs better.
I hate to extend things, but should they consider possibly something like a board of trustees to take that completely off the elders to let them focus on what they're qualified to focus on and not be bogged down?
Yeah. Deacons. It's always a good sign when my wife scoots farther from me. So, like, I think, like, and I would fully say, like, this is not, there's no structure serves mission. Like, so there's certain principles we have clearly in Scripture. And I think this will have to be the last one because Oleg is getting closer and closer to me, and he just could grab it. Like, hey, no. Structure serves mission. There are certain principles we've talked about: wisdom, accountability. My brain's a little tired. I'm sorry. But so with that, I would say, like, I would hardly imagine even 5 years, much less 2 years from now, the structure will be the same exact. I think that we're not married or loyal to a structure. We're loyal to Jesus, and structure should serve that. That being said, I think our next immediate step is, and the one we are working on, is actually filling in that 5th MDL spot. Like, that's the clearest next step that has to happen. And I honestly would like to even move some of the, if I could pick a step 2, I would love to move some of the elders out of the MDL spots as a step 2. Like, those are like, now that these are my ideas, like, so how all these execute, I mean, so like we had all 5 MDLs filled and one moved and one had to be swapped. So like I said, my ideas and my timetable have not been working out successfully so far. But that would be like, if I had a step 1, step 2, that would probably be there. I could definitely see that as a step 3. I could even see prayerfully sorry, I'm trying to, I want to share as much as I can, but I also want to protect confidentiality and all things. So one of the pieces that I think could be helpful that we didn't realize until we were in the midst of a really busy season is that some conversations need to be had with 2 people at a time for everybody's good. So having an additional elder might be a solution to actually increasing bandwidth overall as a church family as well. Unfortunately, once you're in the middle of a crazy season, it's hard to add bandwidth in the middle of that. So there are several pieces so if I would say, like, top 3 next steps, those would probably be like, here's how I would see those sort of like top 3 next steps as quickly as possible. I mean, I would have liked yesterday or sooner. But I think those would be like, I'd say, like, those would take burden off, and it would actually move. And I say burden, it's not a bad thing. Like, I don't mean this is a every part of what we're doing is service to Jesus. And we're told that, like, even the person that serves a cup of water in Jesus' name doesn't lose their reward, right? So there's no role or function done for Jesus in the name of Jesus that is more or less important. But it would actually spread some of that. And so we're working as quickly as possible, but also trying, to Eric's point earlier about the outreach MDL, you want the right fit. I think the selection maybe before was prayerful. It just didn't. It wasn't to be. Anna Blaisdell moving was obviously, but she was phenomenal. And I wasn't talking to her, but Anna Blaisdell was phenomenal in that role, and she really kicked it off really, really well for that. So and we're praying for them and loving them as they're involved in church plan out there. But that also takes time, bandwidth, and change for that. So I'd say in my magic world, those would be like, I'm just talking just as Andrew, nothing else. That would be sort of like what I would say is like, I mean, if I could get this next done in the next week and do them right, that would have been awesome. I don't know how to get them done, we're working on probably the first two more than the third for now. Say what? Yeah. Yes, I saw the hand, but then she left. So anyway. I'll be hanging around after. I don't want to hold up the Slavic service. So I'm around afterwards. Rick's around. Mark's around. But I wanted to say, conclude. I really appreciate. I love serving with you guys online, in person. Yeah.
I just want to say before we close that you started this whole thing with an apology, and I was amazed by that, but I don't think that any apology is necessary. I think you're a fabulous pastor. You've done an amazing job, and I know you do more than just being a pastor. So you have all kinds of balls and you juggle balls, and you do it with kindness, with thoughtfulness, with grace, and you don't panic, which is absolutely amazing to me, because sometimes I would have gone absolutely nuts. And you do it with love. So I think we owe you a major amount of thanks. You've done a super job here.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Well, I'm lucky to be in this church family. I really mean that. And I tell, for me, raising my kids in this church family, it means a ton, So, anyway, let's close in prayer. I will be around. I think we're already messing all the leg up, and he's been very gracious, but I don't want to push that. Lord, we're grateful to you. All this is because of Jesus, who we are, who we're becoming. We owe that all to you and to your Spirit. Thank you for the work that you've done in our midst. We are excited to see more of your magnificent glory displayed through people coming to you as Savior, through lives surrendered and submitted to you, through people growing in their walk with you, through families being united. We are grateful to you. We are prayerful that we ask that you would show us how to share the gospel most effectively. We ask that you would direct and lead us to the right leader for the outreach side of things. We submit all things to your loving hands, and we ask and trust that you will provide. Allow us to be dependent and humble and submissive to your leading and connected with you on the journey. And we pray these things in your name. Amen. Thank you very much. Appreciate you guys. Yes, let's help get this back in shape for Oleg really quickly. Tables, chairs, food would be awesome.